Welcome to the Greater Los Angeles Homeless Count. Thank you for participating in the largest census of homeless individuals in the nation. We appreciate your time and commitment.
Our goal with the count is to get an accurate picture of homelessness in our communities. This information will help us to develop and implement strategies to end homelessness.
This training will highlight the functions and roles within teams, assignment maps, identifying factors for individuals and temporary shelters, and the tally sheets. Your deployment site coordinator will work with you to form teams of 2 to 4 people. You will be on a walking team or a driving team based upon where your group is assigned. The maps will indicate whether you need to walk or drive. The goal is to thoroughly count your assigned area safely. All tracks will require walking to areas that cannot be viewed from the car. Remember to look in public parking garages, alleys, behind dumpsters, and in the parking lots of fast food establishments and shopping centers, as some retailers allow overnight parking in their lots. Some areas you will not count are abandoned buildings due to safety concerns and hospital emergency rooms, because the hospitals will count those people for us.
If your team is driving, you will need to assign the following roles: driver, navigator, and counter. Drivers, keep your eyes on the road and rely on the counters to look for people experiencing homelessness. Navigators are responsible for guiding the driver around the assigned map. They will also keep track of areas that have been covered and assist with counting. Counters, observe and document the number, gender, and age group of homeless people. You will also note the number of vehicles, tents, and makeshift shelters that are being used as homes if you cannot connect the shelter with an individual. Counters decide who is classified as homeless. While team members should provide input in ambiguous situations, the counters will make the final decision. The counters will also be responsible for filling out the tally sheet. If your team is assigned to a walking area, you will need to appoint one team member to function as the navigator and the rest as counters. You will typically need a member of your team to transport you to the assigned area where you will walk or agree upon a place to meet your team in that area. Please be aware that private property is off limits. This includes schools and abandoned buildings.
Let's take a closer look at the maps you'll be using to navigate your assigned area. This is a sample map. The legend on the left-hand side highlights the census tract number as well as the community and service planning area, or SPA. This is designated as a driving tract, which means the teams covering this area will need to use a car to drive between locations within the specified area where homeless individuals may be living, such as parks and shopping centers. The legend also includes estimated road miles, deployment site, and your assigned census tract. Alternatively, the QR code will link you to an online census tract finder that will assist you in locating your census tract within its geographical context. Once on the Census Tract Finder site, you will need to enter your census tract number found in the top right-hand corner of your map. You are going to count on the inside of the blue borders of the census tract. Let's take a look at 2 different streets to help illustrate this. First, consider Hill Road Street. This street acts as a border. Like every street, it has 2 sides, but because it is a border street, you will only count the side of the street that's on the inside of the census tract, not both sides. The team that has the adjacent census tract will count the other side of the street. We are counting 2,155 census tracts within Los Angeles County. Every area is assigned to a team, so if you count the opposite side of a border street, it will be double counted and our numbers will be inaccurate. Alternatively, let's look at the street that runs through the middle of the census tract, Sumatra Street. Since this street runs through the middle, you would count both sides. To review, you are going to count the inside of border streets. For all other interior streets, you will count both sides. Please be sure to count alleys, parks, and shopping center parking lots. One helpful guide is to ask yourself, if I was sleeping outside in this area, where would I be? Report areas that you are not able to reach for any reason. If there is a safety concern about walking through an alley, a park, or a geographically challenging area, like a steep slope, that's okay. You want to make sure that you report these areas and indicate those areas on the map. Please notify your deployment site coordinator of these areas when you return from counting. We will send a special team to count that area.
Now let's talk about how to identify someone experiencing homelessness. We want to count everyone who is experiencing homelessness and sleeping on the street, or in places not intended for long-term human habitation, such as makeshift shelters, tents, vehicles, and RVs. What do we look for when we're trying to identify homeless individuals? Remember, we want to be safe and accurate, so use your best judgment and what we call the ABCs: appearance, behavior, and condition. There are a few signs or indicators that you want to watch out for. Signs include poor hygiene or physical condition, lots of belongings, wearing many layers of clothing or blankets, pushing a cart, sleeping or laying down on the ground or on a bench. It's important to keep in mind that only one of these indicators wouldn't necessarily mean that someone is experiencing homelessness. We want to look at the whole picture and use our best judgment. Here are just a few signs that a car may be being used as a sleeping area: blankets covering up the windows, fogged up windows, multiple flyers or parking tickets on the windshield, vehicles filled with many belongings, and lights on inside. Similarly, RVs may be hooked up to a generator or have an extension cord that runs to an electrical outlet.
Again, we want to look at the whole picture here and use our best judgment. I've received plenty of parking tickets in my day, but that doesn't mean I was living in my car at the time the ticket was on my windshield. A makeshift shelter is any collection of items, bedrolls, blankets, shopping carts, boxes, etc., that are compiled, constructed, and used as a shelter by a homeless person at an outdoor location. The key to identifying where one makeshift shelter ends and another starts is to try to determine the sleeping areas. Identify gaps on the floor in between items such as shopping carts or large personal belongings. Typically, one sleeping area is equivalent to one makeshift shelter. Here we can see two makeshift shelters. On the left side, we see one covered in a black tarp, and on the right side, we see one covered in a green tarp. They had their belongings next to them, but we saw two distinct sleeping areas, so we marked two makeshift shelters on our tally sheets. In this picture, we see a tent between two makeshift shelters. The tent is in front of a building with a blue tarp hung from the windows. Do we count this as a tent or a makeshift shelter? In this example, we count the most prominent structure. The tent is the defining structure, so we add one mark for a tent on the tally sheet. Remember, this is a visual count only, so it is important to be respectful and keep a few guidelines in mind. Do not knock on the door or open a tent flap to see how many occupants are inside. Respect their privacy. Do not engage with individuals in their shelters or personal space. If you can't see how many occupants are inside, then only count the makeshift shelter, tent, and vehicle, not both.
Now that you have an understanding of who and what to count, let's take a look at the tally sheet. On the top line, you will find the service planning area you are in, the census tract number, the split code if the map you received is a split of a census tract, and the name of the deployment site and the deployment site code. It's important to fill out your tally sheet completely, and please print clearly and legibly. Write in your deployment site coordinator's name and phone number so you can contact them if you have any questions while you are counting. Print the names of your team members and their phone numbers. This is important in case we need to follow up with you regarding a question on the tally sheet.
In the following section, you will use a hash or tally mark to identify how many individuals you observe. The fifth person you see should be represented by a diagonal line made across the first four tally marks. Please notice the different age and gender sections. An unaccompanied youth is a person under the age of 18 who is not accompanied by an adult. If you see a family or group of adults and children, please use the family section. In this section, each family is recorded on the same row. Only record one tally mark per person on the entire tally sheet. For example, if you record a mother and her children in the family section, do not also include them under the individual section.
Remember, this is a visual count only. Maintain a safe distance and use your best judgment. Do not approach a person to inquire about their age, gender, or family status. The final section is for recording vehicles, tents, and makeshift shelters. Use tally marks to indicate the number of cars, vans, RVs, tents, and/or makeshift shelters you observe in their respective rows. Please keep in mind that 0 is a valid number, as it is also important for us to know the areas that don't have homeless individuals. After you have covered your assigned area, please fill in fields that do not have a tally mark with a 0. Finally, be sure to return your tally sheet to the tally sheet validator at your deployment site when you're done counting.
We want to be sure everyone is counting safely when you are deployed.
Many of you will be counting at night, so we've provided at least one flashlight per team.
Flashlights are for tally sheets and lighting your path. Please remember that the space homeless individuals are occupying is their living area. Be respectful and do not flash your light on them, their vehicles, tents, or makeshift shelters.
If there are any areas you feel unsafe counting, please leave the area and mark it on the map. This could be a dark alley or park or any situation you're not comfortable. Please inform your deployment site coordinator of any areas on your map that you did not count.
If you feel you are in immediate danger, call 911. If you need to report any non-emergency criminal activity to law enforcement, please contact the local police department. Your deployment site coordinator will provide that number to you.
The Greater Los Angeles Homeless Count is a large event with thousands of participants. We expect media outlets to be interested. If someone from a media outlet approaches you, feel free to talk with them about your personal experience. If they request more detailed information about the homeless count, please direct them to your deployment site coordinator, who can provide them with more information.
The last thing you will need to do before you deploy is sign and return the liability waiver. You are not sanctioned to count if you do not turn in the liability waiver. Also, for volunteers 17 and younger, please see your deployment site coordinator for assignments at the site. Count volunteers must be 18 years of age to deploy in the field.
On behalf of LAHSA, thank you again for volunteering.
And stay safe out there.